Good morning. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Executive Committee for Tuesday, April 10th. My name is Jacob Fry. I'm the chair of this committee. With me on the dais are council members Gordon, Bender, and Johnson. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have two items on the agenda for today. The first of which is a reappointment of John Friedel to the appointed position of fire chief for a 2-year term beginning January 2nd, 2018, and the referral of that nomination to the City Council for the setting of a public hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and move this item forward. Is there any discussion on this topic? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very excited by this nomination and happy to support the chief for another term. And don't want to steal Councilmember Gordon's thunder on here because I know what we experienced with Minneapolis Academy when the explosion occurred there. We were out on site, but just seeing the fire chief and his leadership in person, just the difficult situations that he deals with is very eye-opening, and just yet another experience that gives me the confidence that he's the right person for the job and has all the well-rounded skills for dealing with the most difficult situations that we end up facing. So thank you, Chief, for all your work, and look forward to supporting you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I'll also let the record reflect that we've been joined by Council Vice President Jenkins. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo what Councilmember Johnson said, but I also feel that right now, the kind of leadership the chief is providing in our department is meeting two other really important needs. The first is that the fire department is, I think, of the city departments, leading the way in hiring, meeting our hiring diversity goals and being very intentional about every way to support opening career pathways to women and people of color, and doing it in a way that's baking it into the systems of the department's hiring. And that's really important. I think there's a lot that we can learn from how the department has approached that in every department of the city. And then the second piece is that while we need to have a department that is ready to go for these big, huge emergencies or the fires that we see across the city, our department more and more is dealing with the sort of crisis that we see in our healthcare system, and is answering a lot of 911 calls for basic health needs more and more. And our department needs to evolve to that volume of calls, to put the right resources to the right calls, and the way that the chief is thinking strategically about our city's resources and the costs, and making sure that our trained firefighters are available for those emergency calls and aren't, handling a twisted ankle instead, is really important, I think, for the sustainability of our department and the sustainability of our city's financial resources. And those two pieces, I think, again, are really, really important for the future of our city. And then on a personal note, I've gotten to see the chief with a group of fourth graders that come every year from Whittier Elementary School. And I know it's just one of the ways that he's interacting with the youth of our city and just really inspiring them back to this idea of creating career pathways down to the littlest precious children in our city, and giving them the inspiration to imagine their future, how they could serve our city that they're growing up in. And it's really great to see. And so I'm excited for the chief's continued leadership. I also wanted to note, if we do the sort of normal process of referring to the Public Safety Committee and then setting the hearing there, the hearing won't be until May 17th. So I think we could consider expediting that process a bit. So I'll be talking to my colleagues about our options before the Friday council meeting when we would set those hearings. So one option, we could set the hearing for April 19th at the council meeting on Friday, for example. So thank you.
Seeing no further comment, I will simply add that I'm very proud to nominate Chief Friedel. He's been doing some extraordinary work for quite a long time, and what it came down to for me was a combination of things. One, it was the Pathways program that Council President discussed, and that program has been extremely successful. The second was that we are experiencing an uptick in calls that our firefighters are tasked with responding to, and it is due to the changing healthcare system, and it's due to people's changing health. And obviously that's been in decline. But the final thing, and this was really the kicker, is that in a time of crisis, I thought to myself, who would I want to be calling and working with? and it was undoubtedly Chief Friedel. And that was the ultimate reason why I decided that he is the right person for the job at this time. So thank you, Chief. The motion is on the table. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. That item passes. The next item on the docket is the reappointment of Noah Schuckman to the appointed position of Regulatory Services Director for a 2-year term beginning January 2nd, 2018, and the referral of that nomination to the City Council for the setting of a public hearing. I will go ahead and move this item. Is there any discussion on this topic? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to speak in support of all of Noah's work. He has been just a fantastic partner to work with. Is just so responsive and really digs into issues and runs the department extremely well. And I kind of think about it sometimes like 311 or the assessor's office, where you might not have a lot of attention on regulatory services because it's running so smoothly. And so it makes it really easy as a policymaker having a leader like that in charge of a department. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge that regulatory services deals with a lot of sensitive issues that personally affect people, and they can be very hot button issues. So we shouldn't take it for granted, the fact that it's pretty quiet over there in regulatory services, because it could be very noisy and loud. And I think it's just a sign, though, of the leadership team that Noah runs and has put together, and the type of people working in regulatory services. So greatly appreciate all the work going on over there. Thank you so much, and look forward to supporting you.
Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to speak in favor of this nomination and both nominations as well, because I think they both have some significant inputs into the race equity agenda that we're trying to move forward in this city, and really identifying and addressing some of the inequities that are in our culture, like the Pathways program, and some of the rental housing issues that we have. And so I really strongly support these nominations as well.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like many of our departments, regulatory services is also going through a bit of a stretch in its work focus, right? And so I think while the day-to-day needs of inspecting buildings and meeting that regulatory function is always still there, the Regulatory Services Department has been asked to step up and start to look at policy change and get involved in responding to the new information that we have from our eviction study, and respond to the effects of rising housing costs, as well as increased voicing from our renter population about the conditions of housing in our city. And I think that Director Schuckman's leadership is really important right now, the consistency of being there during the time when we've created a new rental tier licensing system, and continuing to tweak that, and looking at ways that we can be creative within the constraints of state law to make sure that we're doing all we can to protect renters in Minneapolis, and working with our partners in the advocacy community and the legal community who are there to protect renters, as well as to work with the landlords in our city that are doing a really good job of supporting renters and finding ways to lift up and support folks who are providing housing that's stable and affordable and safe for people. So that's a big load, and like I said, ever evolving. And so I think we're lucky to have you being willing to stay during this time of transition. And I think it's important that we support you and the department in what you may need in terms of staffing to continue to meet our expectations as we increase them. So thank you very much for your leadership, and thank you, Mayor, for your second great nomination.
Thank you, Madam President. So the reason we decided to go with Mr. Schuckman is a combination of things. First, we talked with his staff, and they like him, but more importantly, they respect him. And having the support of those who you work with and for is, I think, exceedingly important. The second piece is that we're we're going through a bit of a transition of mentality to thinking about, reg services, not from the building or simply violation standpoint, but from a human element. As reg services is responsible for maintaining some of the upkeep of our housing stock, making sure that the city looks good, is pristine, is safe and healthy and vibrant, but also that obviously all of those elements and aspects influence and have an impact on people. And so as we move towards that transition, I think it's important that we have a strong leader at the helm, and Mr. Shookman has been that. I'll also note that over the last 7 or so years, we've gone through 5 or 6 different directors of regulatory services, maybe 8 years. One of them is now our city coordinator. Several other of them are no longer with the city. But I think Mr. Shookman is most definitely the right choice at the right time. And as we look to further improve efficiencies in both regulatory services, but also in the entire city enterprise, I think he's the one to sort of lead that reorganization. So I'm proud to move him forward. There's a motion on the table. All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. And that item carries and will be forwarded to the City Council. And seeing that there are no further items before us, we are adjourned.